Accessing library computer data.
Out there are no saints, just people.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. We are continuing our run through Star Trek Deep Space Nine. We're up to the 17th episode of the third season. It's called Visionary. First aired on February 27th in 1995. Teleplay goes to John Shirley, story goes to Ethan H. Koch, and it was directed by Reza Badiyi. After receiving a minor dose of radiation poisoning, O'Brien inexplicably begins experiencing a series of jumps into the near future. Meanwhile, a Romulan delegation arrives on the station, expecting an intelligence report on the Dominion. We're joined by patron Neil. Neil, how are you? This is our second rodeo sort of the day. It's your second appearance on the show. It's also our second rodeo at recording. So how are you?
I've jumped forward 5 hours and this one works well, as I can guarantee you.
Excellent. As long as you're not dead in the future and the recording is all there to send me over email.
This is future Neil. I've come back and I can tell you it all goes swimming. But I'll always be a little bit different.
Well, yeah, unfortunately you called me back while I was asleep, even though I was expecting you to return. But we're going to take a break, play an audio clip. Me and Neil are going to cross our fingers, hope this all goes well, and then after the break we will talk about Visionary.
I went over the internal sensor logs, and I did find evidence of a minor temporal disturbance in Quarks, and another one later on the promenade. Both disturbances happened at about the same time as the Chief's experiences.
So it would seem that you did travel into the future, and then return to the same moment that you left.
Have you any idea what might have caused this time shift?
Not yet. I wanted to go over the medical scans Julian took of you earlier. That dose of ionizing radiation you received might have something to do with it.
How?
I'm not sure, but it's a good place to start. I have heard a couple of theories that ambient low-level radiation could have a temporal...
All right, Neil, so we're going to pretend that we didn't actually talk about this for a couple minutes beforehand, and this is an episode that's extremely similar to Whispers, which was your previous appearance on the show. So did you notice anything, or did you think that it was kind of a weird, maybe not a coincidence? I can't remember if I intentionally gave you this one. But what did you think as comparison to Whispers?
Yeah, I thought it was... Yeah, there's definite similarities. I mean, it's elevated by Meany's very, I think one of the writers called it his very human performance as O'Brien, which we talked about a lot last time, so we probably won't do it today. But yeah, it's a classic, it's basically a TNG plot, but with DS9 trimmings. And actually that really worked for me. And I think my problem with Whispers was that the ending was such a gallop. You know, we talked about how there was 5 minutes left in the episode, and there was still like nowhere near enough time to conclude everything and wrap it all up. But with this one, it actually felt like it was a really clever ending. At the same time, it was thought through a bit more, and all the pieces sort of came together a bit nicer, and that really filled me with hope that DS9 is really getting its stuff together now.
Yeah, you had mentioned you're on the Discord channel, and you had mentioned that
I love Discord.
DS9, I like Discord as well. I spend less time on Twitter now because of Discord, actually. But you had mentioned on Discord that you thought DS9 was your favorite Star Trek series at this point, and I wasn't sure if you had actually watched this episode before doing it. We're a little bit ahead because we have a couple episodes to go before we get to this one, but this was the recording time that worked out for us. But Visionary, as you say, is a very TNG plot in a DS9 story, and I think that, or in a DS9 setup, and I think that it actually works both ways for me, where I'm not really sure if I think that I'm not really sure if the series does TNG plots all that well. Although I don't know if it's really just the sense that TNG plots belong to TNG, and I don't know if this series is different enough where they should be trying to do something else from them. But that said, I do like the mystery aspect I like these sort of standalone mystery episodes, even though I think that the mystery here is a little less satisfying than Whispers on some level because of how the episode is structured, I guess. But you're right that it's a Cole Meany joint. It is a good O'Brien episode. It's a good little mystery. And I think one of the things that's actually strongest, and I was wondering if you had caught on to this, is the while this mystery is working in the foreground, the background of the episode is all about the serialized plots that have been happening for the season, basically, with the Romulan delegation appearing to talk about the Dominion and everything. Did you find that unique, or did you find that sort of a problem with how the episode was going along?
No, I think that's what I'm really responding to at this point in the show is, I think one of my problems coming to TNG and DS9 at this stage, 25 years after they aired, or 23 years in this case, is I can kind of spot a throwaway episode at the start within the first few minutes, and it's very hard for them to keep me hooked then. But when you add in the serialization, when you add in the bigger picture, I guess, it does make those throwaway, those sci-fi mysteries, those technobabble episodes, it gives you more to kind of hang your hat on. It gives you more to keep you interested, for me anyway. I think the reason it's moved ahead of TNG for me is that those throwaway one-off episodes in TNG, they feel like a bit of a lark, they feel like a bit of fun and not much to really think about. But in this, it made me think about, well, how do I think about the Romulans? And that's not a bad achievement for a show that is, again, just a bit of a one-off mystery.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with you that what's nice about the serialized backstory or the backdrop of this one is that while it ties into the plot nicely and everything makes sense in and of itself, the fact that it's there can lessen your dependence on the mystery being a good resolution. Because I think my primary issue with Visionary is that the setup is it's a cool idea, but the jumps start getting a little bit silly as the episode goes along. And, O'Brien, towards the end of his, the very first one is probably the most effective, where he sees himself talking to Quark, and then 5 hours later, he's back talking to Quark, and he looks back and he sees himself as he had appeared before across the promenade, across the way. And that's a very creepy, good one. It gets a little, it's then he sees himself die because of the phaser thing in the wall, and you're like, okay, that's interesting, that's fine. I know he's not going to die, but that's kind of neat to see yourself die. And then he does a jump where the station blows up, and then after that, he does a jump where he jumps into O'Brien, who is sleeping. Future O'Brien is for some reason asleep, even though he knows that the station is going to blow up. And the time travel aspect really starts to fall apart on itself at that point, where future O'Brien doesn't seem like he's really a future version of O'Brien. He seems like he's another dimension O'Brien who's unfamiliar with everything that's going on. And the episode can get away with the weakness of the mystery because the plot in the background is strong enough to push it forward. I actually think that the Romulan plot here is kind of stupid on some level, and it makes sense for a Romulan to want to blow up the wormhole and stuff, but the station seems very defenseless against one ship, and it kind of it's a lot of I feel like every time we have a Romulan story, there's something about them sensing the warp core of the Romulan warbird, and when they sense it halfway through this episode, I'm screaming at the TV like, it's the Romulans, there's a cloaked Romulan ship out there, how can you not know that there's a cloaked Romulan ship? But other than that, I like the concept. I'm just not sure if the execution pulls it off for me in the way that Whispers did.
Yeah, I wanted to, that was my first big question that occurred to me was, I'm intrigued. I think I used to really like the Romulans, or find them interesting, I guess, not like, but I used to find them intriguing. And now I find they're a pretty second-rate Cardassians in terms of the themes that they explore. Is that totally bonkers of me to think that?
I think the Romulans are horribly underdeveloped for how often they show up. Because in this episode, do you get Sisko's line about the Romulans don't like to get directly involved in things, they'd rather pull the strings in the background?
Yeah.
That seems to be their prominent character trait. I think of them as a little bit more honorable than the Cardassians, would be my take. I don't think the Romulans are really torturing people.
Right, okay. But yeah, it's like a strange I guess it's almost like it's almost stuff as simple as the character design. If they're a race of cunning tricksters almost who are pulling strings Machiavellian style. We're talking about Discovery's revamp of the Klingons. Well, maybe it would have been time to revamp the Romulan look and just give them less of the silly space boot stuff. Maybe it is the underdevelopment that kind of streamed out of me. It was like when they arrive at the ship and they're kind of bossing or trying to boss Sisko around. I was a bit like, oh, yeah, the Romulans. Once upon a time, I would have been really excited to see them turn up, like in The Defector of TNG, which is an amazing episode. now I'm a bit like, oh, this is a bit wasted on the Romulans. Like, are there not more interesting races this could have revolved around?
So I guess that's a good place to start. So before we start into the O'Brien aspect of things, have you seen all the episodes leading up to this one, or did you skip ahead to watch Visionary because we were recording it?
I did. So I said that DS9 had become my favorite because I knew me and you were going to talk about Visionary. So I did skip one or two, including the one where Bareil dies, which was truly a stinker of an episode of TV. So within 2 minutes of finishing that, I was wondering if I could retract my statement about DS9 because it's still got some bumpy moments. But yeah, I skipped ahead. So I went from past tense, which, as you'll know from the Discord channel, I love.
Yeah.
And actually, one of my favorite things with season 3 has been listening to you and Clay. I think you haven't actually. I really felt like, oh, this is the show getting its stuff together. I think you two have been a kind of dissenting voices on that, which I think has been great because it's made me go, oh, am I being too generous here to this show because I want it to be better?
Sure.
But I definitely, having skipped ahead, was like, oh, I've gone from past tense to Visionary. This show it's starting to get it right a lot.
I think Clay had a similar experience around The Search. When The Search happened, he was like, all right, like guns are fucking blazing. Like we're going to get, like, this is the new dawn of this series. And then the show quickly reverted back to its Star Trek roots, right? Like it's never going to escape that. However, what I think Whispers kind of does, and we talked about it a little bit in the Defiant episode with Darren, is that a lot of the stuff that happens in the episodes is stuff that has previously been built up, and they don't really explain what they're doing. Like the whole reason for the Romulans to be here is everything that's happened in the third season to this point. Like they gave them the cloaking device. They want the information from them. The Romulans aren't willing to go into the Gamma Quadrant themselves. They'd rather have the Federation do it. So it's funny that you mentioned the Romulan nature. I think what's interesting here is that you're seeing a angle of Alpha Quadrant politics that TNG never got around to doing, because the Romulans, all of the species in DS9 to this point, are reacting to the Dominion threat, right? And everyone is reacting to them a little bit differently from each other. And to me, the strength of DS9 is that it takes those situations, which would be episodes in TNG, and it actually turns it into like a believable geopolitical landscape where you understand why the different races are reacting to things differently, and it adds a richness to the storytelling. And the Romulans here fit my conception of what the Romulans would do, and they do it in a sort of subtle way, except for the ending. I don't really believe that they'd blow up the station. That seems a little bit extreme to me, but the way that they lay them out is good for me.
Yeah, I guess one of the things, I mean, I think we talked in the last time I was on about how the first kind of glimmer of hope for me with DS9 in the kind of very, very patchy early episodes was, I think, Necessary Evil, where the end is that ambiguous sort of, oh, something has changed here, and whilst next week I'll tune in and the same characters will be occupying the same space, something has happened here. There has been a shifting of the relationship and evolving. And even in terms of the end of this episode, having Sisko be a badass, and the DS9 hasn't been blown up, but we all know that the Romulans had it in their plans. That felt like even though it might not impact, and I'm guessing it probably won't, the next time the Romulans turn up, it still made me think, oh, I've come away satisfied that at least there are shifting sands here and there's interesting things happening and afoot. Versus an episode of TNG where it's always a bow at the end of the episode.
Yeah, I think it's tough because we're in I think he pronounced his name Seal. It's Ciel. It's either Seal or CL or something like that. He has just broken it down as he has the three portions of how he or she views DS9. Ignore season 1; it doesn't exist. Season 2 and 3 are like the intro, getting to know people, and then 4 and 5 are the Cold War, and then 6 and 7 are the actual war. I think that's a good way to look at it. And the thing about it is that the development of DS9 to this point is really fleshing out the Romulan thing that I had talked about before. So the Romulans will be back, but I think that it's important to know how they are all reacting to things like this, and how the Klingons will get involved eventually, and the Cardassians are always out there and stuff like that. And I think the show really just sort of understands that is the universe that they're living in. Like you can think of DS9 as a big conference room. So yeah, if I just had to summarize it, it would be that the Romulans are just the way that they are portrayed here means something. I have a question for you. In the episodes that you watched, did you watch Heart of Stone?
I don't think so. Refresh my memory though, in case some of these titles are really washing over me. I don't think titles are DS9 strong point.
Sure. Heart of Stone is the one where Kira gets stuck in the rock.
No, God, that sounds dreadful. How did I miss that?
You didn't miss that one. So I think that Visionary actually ties into the Romulan aspect here of world building to me, because there's the scene where Kira is explaining to Odo that the Romulan was asking her inappropriate questions about whether or not Odo was attracted to her or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
That's building off of Heart of Stone, which comes before this. So that there's the layering there that DS9 does, which TNG never actually got into.
Yeah. It's I did find that, like, just while we're sort of wildfiring over here, I don't give a flying fluff about Kira and Odo and that storyline. Please tell me that goes away soon.
No, that does not go away.
Right.
It might knock down DS9 in your estimation. No, that's going to be there going forward, and it's funny because it's so scattershot that I think Clay has never had an episode where it's brought up. So once it appears, he's going to be like, "Why is this just coming out of the blue for me?" But what did you think of outside of the Dominion aspect? What did you think of the main O'Brien plot line here? We can get into it, breaking down O'Brien.
Yeah, so it is. It's just fun. I don't know. It's just fun. There was something about it. As you say, it is a goofy set of jumps beyond the first one. I think the first one, particularly the second time you see the first jump, works really well, and it's kind of chilling in its way. And then especially kind of seeing future O'Brien just kind of disappear into nothingness is pretty unsettling stuff. But then it quickly becomes kind of pantomime stuff, and having O'Brien save O'Brien in the barroom fight, and the look that Colomini gives Colomini, who gives one right back. I think I was watching this at like midnight or something, and I think I actually did an audible laugh, which is strange for watching a 25-year-old episode of TV. It's goofy, but it's fun, and I think, yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe the supporting weight of the support of the serialized stuff means that I'm not relying on the mechanic of the mystery to keep me going. That can just be goofy and fun in the background, whilst I also get a bit of like fun Alpha Quadrant stuff and get to go, oh, Sisko might talk tough here in a bit. How exciting. Right.
Yeah, he's gonna yell at somebody. I think that what did you think about the tone? I find the tone where, and by the tone I mean that the way everyone else is treating O'Brien as he's going through these jumps to be an interesting part of the way that the episode was written. However, I don't think it pairs really well with the seriousness of what O'Brien is experiencing in the future. I love it on the level that it's a kind of character comfort that TNG would never do. Like when O'Brien jumps into the sickbay in the future and he looks at his dead corpse, and Bashir comes in and he's like, "Oh, like you're here finally." And they have an argument about O'Brien can't believe that Bashir just let him die, and Bashir said, "Well, no, I didn't let you die. Your body just kind of gave up." And then O'Brien gets pissed off at him. There's like the sort of jokey, very familial relationship talking here, and Dax is kind of on the same level, where people are more interested in the problem as opposed to the fact that the station is going to blow up. And like O'Brien gets shot by the laser in the wall. Kira tells him that she's moved the Romulan delegation into that sector of the station, and Sisko's like, "Oh, that's weird. Well, let's just see how this plays out," knowing full well that O'Brien will die because of this, and he doesn't know what to do. It's just kind of an odd pairing. I don't know if I wanted the show to be more serious or less serious, but I think more serious, because it would have tied in with the Dominion stuff a little bit better, although I don't know. And then maybe the tone of the lightheartedness takes away from the ending a little bit. What did you think about the tone, about the comedy that was interspersed and stuff?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think it's hard not to feel like maybe just concentrating on, I'm gonna fanboy here for Bashir and O'Brien, but not in the way that some creepy people on the internet do. But maybe just concentrating on that relationship. I felt like whenever Dax, we just continue to bash Dax on the podcast, but I found that whenever Dax was giving getting involved in the plot line, or Kira was, even Cisco to an extent. It was, yeah, maybe it was the tone that was shifting slightly, and I would have preferred them to just keep it to. I found there was real reward in the moments where Bashir and O'Brien were engaging on this problem. Stuff like Bashir saying, "Who am I to argue with myself?" Which I think, as Zach Handlin says in the AV Club, that it's actually really good writing, that the dynamic between these two hasn't changed, but the relationship has evolved. And that was a really nice example of that. Whereas, when they're all in ops sticking their oar in, yeah, maybe the kind of immediacy of the threat was lost a bit.
I think so. I understand that. So the episode to me is a little bit problematic because it has very high stakes, but it feels, as you say, it might have been better as a smaller story, dealing with Bashir and O'Brien being a little bit separate from the main cast and stuff. So because they're on the station, O'Brien has to tell the crew about what's going on because the station is going to blow up. And that gives it a sense of scope and scale that makes it feel like a TNG episode to me, that the destruction of the station is going to happen. Like, DS9 does not really threaten destruction of the station all that much. And when it does, it usually is not in a better episode. It's usually kind of a weaker episode when they fall back on that. And I think you're right. Like, fleshing out the Bashir and O'Brien relationship maybe would have been a more interesting way to go about this jumping. But then if his jumps don't have any stakes, I don't know if they're interesting enough. I don't know how you'd rewrite it.
I'll argue against myself here, because actually bringing in Cisco and Odo meant that they got to have what I thought was a very nice moment where they're
in his office, in
examining
Odo's
the
office.
replicator. Oh, and in the office too. Actually, they had a couple of good scenes in this where Odo's like, sometimes I need to remind you how much
good
work
I
do, how good I am.
Yep.
Which was nice. So I guess this is the show finding its feet, right? This is the show. And I'm hoping and I'm guessing, based on what you guys have all said on Discord, that they really do start to work out some of these kinks, some of these imbalances in the storytelling.
Yeah, I think because to me, what's before I go off on that tangent, what you reminded me of is I actually I like the Odo and the Cisco scene in Odo's office, mostly because of the line from Odo. He's like, "I always interview Quark, no matter what goes on." The replicator scene I had a bit of a harder problem with. I like the line about Odo saying, "I have to remind you how good I am." The replicator and the bomb in the wall, to me, was too much technobabble. Like, at that point, the episode really started to crank out the sort of techno bullshit talk about what was going on. They're beaming this thing into the wall. It's not a surveillance device. It wasn't meant to kill. They used the replicator and turned it into a transporter. There's a quantum singularity circling the station. It's way too much shit that no one really cares about. And while I put up with that stuff on TNG, it felt like it fit TNG's style a little bit more. DS9 feels fraudulent, and I have little patience for their technobabble when they really get into it. It feels more like time filler than it ever did on TNG. But the technobabble aspect there, fitting it into your Bashir and O'Brien thing, if the mystery of what was happening was less scientific, I probably would have liked the episode a little bit more. If it was just we don't know why this is happening, but it's happening. But once they start breaking down, like did you find the Klingon and Romulan? I found that the Klingon and Romulan plot was overly complicated as a way to set up what was going to happen to the station.
It's weirdly,
does that make sense?
Yeah, it's weirdly overcomplicated, but also slightly half-baked at the same time. Because am I crazy, or is it a quite un-Klingon-y thing to do, to go to such extravagant lengths to beam in a device like that?
Yeah, I would think so. I thought that they didn't seem very Klingon-y at all. Like, they're like the intelligence agency of the Klingon Empire. It doesn't seem like that's how the Klingon should operate.
No, but the idea of the Klingon intelligence agency is fascinating at the same time.
Right.
How do they do the kind of covert black ops? We've seen the cunning races do it. It would be fascinating to see, like, are the Klingons dreadful at it? Or is it their weaker officers who are demoted to this? Or, if they had, that's what I mean about half-baked, if they had put a bit more into that would have been fascinating to see. Instead, they just seem like three standard Klingons getting into bar fights and, shouting consonants.
Right, and to tie into the overall plot arc with the Dominion here, the Dominion are a unified force on the other side of the wormhole, right? And this episode is kind of highlighting the Alpha Quadrant powers do not get along with each other in the way that the Dominion do. And the Dominion have a huge advantage in the fact that the Alpha Quadrant powers constantly try to one-up each other and that none of them trust each other.
Do you think that's laid out in the episode, though, or is that you giving a bit of headcanon being quite favorable to...
That is headcanon, but I think that the episode supports it. I'm kind of implying... I'm kind of implying a way that the show will go forward, but at the same time, I think you can read that out of this episode, even if it isn't explicitly stated that that's what's going on. But I mean, the this is a Federation station, basically, but the Romulans and Klingons show up, and the Federation is trying to act as peacemaker while these two are bickering with each other, while a much larger, more important issue of the Dominion is out there. And I think that it's a good insight into the potential problems that the Alpha Quadrant would have in defending itself.
Yeah, you're right entirely. And if that's where things go, I'm very excited to see that. But yeah, just a little bit more work on that subplot would have been. I want to hear that stuff. I want to hear that laid out, and it might be me being stupid, but maybe at this stage of DS9, I'm a bit fed up of joining the dots for them a little bit. Stuff that we've talked about where. You get excited about a great episode, as I've clearly done with Visionary, and then you watch a stinker and you sort of think, well, I've given you guys a lot of goodwill at this point. We're 3 seasons in. 3 seasons in. And they're getting some stuff
like
so right.
75 episodes in. I think that the problem with season 3 so far has been that they are reluctant to really embrace the meta, not the meta, but the big Dominion aspect. They don't really know what to do at this point.
Yeah.
And so season 3 kind of feels a little bit of a stall on some level. And what's fun about this episode, I think, is that it brings it back. And I think that it does. This is the kind of story that the DS9 should tell. And it's maybe the reason that you liked it, because you need this underlying Dominion arc thing. And then on top of that, you can just do a regular Star Trek episode.
Sure.
And this is a good balance of those two things. I don't think it's a great episode, but I think it's a very good, solid one that really kind of feels like the way that the show should go forward from here.
Yeah, it reminded me of X-Files early episodes where the conspiracy hadn't gotten totally overblown, and you would just see hints at this, scratching of the surface, and it didn't need to overly explain everything, but just the little tantalizing hints were enough to kind of keep you going. And I'm really hoping that DS9, when it gets to unveiling the full scale of the Dominion threat, can live up to that. As you say, it's sort of weird that they started the season with it, and I'm guessing they'll bookend it, and then in the middle we are sort of just floating along with little tantalizing tidbits.
Yes, yeah, it's more. It's not even. I wouldn't even call them tantalizing. It would just be like people kind of mention them every once in a while to remind you that they're out there. But yeah, outside of that. That is kind of the main problem with what I think season 3 actually has to go through.
The Midsummer Night's Dream episode where they kind of shoehorn in that everyone's just delighted to see their loved ones because of the Dominion threat was a bit of a... I mean, either get on with the threat or not.
I kind of enjoy that episode for whatever reason. I think about that episode more than a lot of these. Like, I'll just never think about life support ever again. Life
support, that's what it's called. Yes, God, what a dreadful episode.
So I don't know how did you enjoy the introduction of the dartboard into the Quark's bar?
Yeah, it's I don't know which I don't like more. There are two things in Star Trek that I really don't like. One of them is when they stick... I hope I didn't say this last time and I'm now just repeating myself. It's when they stick an invented planet in front of a thing that we use in everyday life. So instead of saying, you'll have to try Quark's pasta, it's you'll have to try Quark's Vulcan pasta or his Panaldarian wine. Instead of just saying wine, it does my head in. I don't know what's worse, that or when they shoehorn bits of 20th century culture like a dartboard into a space bar. I mean, I don't. It felt
they'd have a more futuristic version of darts, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
They don't have to be playing.
Yeah,
they wouldn't be. It wouldn't be. If he's like, here, Quark, let's put some music in your in your bar here, he wouldn't pull out like a phonograph, you know,
Yeah.
from the 1920s and insert it. It would be an updated version of the dart game.
In a world where it's possible to go into a hollow suite and have a virtual version of anyone you like available, I don't see them enjoying the same leisure pursuits as a 1970s pub in Northern England, you know?
Do you like darts?
I like. I don't know how much of it breaches into outside of the UK. There's a culture around darts that I like. There's a kind of a boozing and the fact that it's guys who are not in shape who are world champions who come out to theme music and there's people dress up. Like there's a lot of fun to it. But I wouldn't really play it, and I think any bar that I went to that had darts in, I'd be more likely to just leave and go to a different bar, to be honest.
Interesting. It's probably different over here. I really enjoy dart. We don't have any sort of there's no culture around it over here. It's mostly just a nice thing when bars have dartboards because it gives you something to do. I'm a big fan of having sort of relatively mindless things to do while you're in situations like that. And I like them for that reason. But I think that as on a production level, it's nice for the bar to do because it allows them to shoot scenes that have a little bit of action in them as opposed to people just standing next to each other. The dartboard does continue to appear. You know,
and in terms of how it was introduced and stuff, like I had no actual problem with the scenes. Quark throwing the 3 darts at once. It's not terrible stuff. It's just one of those weird bugbears. Actually, I would love to hear what other people's weird bugbears are about Star Trek, because mine are those two and the 1980s soap opera style staring at the camera as you go out of the cold open. But they just it's not for me, but I'll allow it because you know what? I bet Colomini is the guy who said we should have a dartboard. It's kind of fun.
Yep. I guess there were rumors at this time that he was considering leaving the show to go into film, which never comes to pass. Yeah, but he apparently had to reassure the writing staff that he didn't plan on leaving. That would have been a big loss for them.
Oh, God, yeah, that would have been an absolutely huge loss. I mean, the show, I'm sort of not really sure about who kind of ebbs and flows in their involvement in the show over the next few seasons. But to me, and I'm not just saying this because of the Irish thing, to me, he's sort of like the heart of the show at the moment.
Interesting. Yep. You'd put him above someone like Odo?
Yeah, I mean, I find Odo interesting. I'm relating to his stories. Kira, I'm finding increasingly interesting. I'm guessing Cisco, because I love him being a badass, and you guys are saying there's a lot of that. That sounds fantastic. But when I sort of boot up an episode and it's an O'Brien episode, it just gives me a bit of a warm, fuzzy feeling already that it's going to at least it's going to have at least a border, like a base level of enjoyment and kind of decent acting, maybe, as well. I have
a friend who really enjoys the mystery episodes of Star Trek. They're like his favorite kind of episodes. So it would be like the Remember Me from TNG or Clues, things like that. This one would probably be one that he'd enjoy. Whispers would be one that he'd enjoy. I think that similar to how the characters in TNG started to get episodes that were built around them, O'Brien's episodes going forward always kind of remind me of these Whispers in this one. They're not always mysteries, but there is always kind of a TNG tilt to them in the way that they're told. So if you enjoy these kind of episodes, it would be the same for him going forward. This is basically what they stick him in as.
My question about mystery episodes, and I said last time that I really don't enjoy them. They are often my least favorite episodes, particularly in TNG. And maybe that's why I was so happy and responded so well to this one, because it had more to it. But
what do you not like about the mysteries? Just before you ask your question, sorry.
Well, I guess my question is the answer to that. It's, do you think or do you find that the episodes provide enough clues for you to satisfyingly solve the mystery yourself?
No, I don't. They're very Sherlock Holmesy mysteries, where you just are incapable of getting the answer until Sherlock Holmes comes in and says everything that happened.
Exactly. And when it's laid out, you sort of go, oh, okay, to varying degrees. Sometimes you go, okay, because it's a Romulan ship and there's some nice plot elements in there. And sometimes you just go, oh, it's a clone of a species we haven't really met, and okay, fine, yeah. Well, it was a fun 40 minutes of telly.
See, what I think the show has to do with mystery stuff is the way that Whispers ended, not this one, but Whispers. The way that Whispers ended makes me, after the mystery is over, I am less interested in the mechanics of the mystery and more about what the ending actually means, for like on like a sort of philosophical level. Violations feels like it's kind of trying to do that, but I don't find it satisfying whatsoever. It's a little weird that it's a different O'Brien who's now going to be in the show for the rest of the series, but it's still O'Brien. It's still
completely.
It's still the same O'Brien. He's just from the future. He's got like 5 hours of memories that the other one didn't have. What did you think about the ending here? And did
I looked at some of the reviews and I read the reviews that are available online, and a lot of them dwelled on that point, and I sort of thought 5 hours of Miles O'Brien is not going to be a hugely changed Miles O'Brien. The man's barely changed through being involved in multiple intergalactic scenarios.
Right.
So why would 5 hours suddenly mean, oh my God, every time we see O'Brien from now on, he's a different person? It's like, well, I mean, yeah, technically, but I don't think it means anything.
He didn't really experience anything otherworldly in that 5 hours. He didn't experience anything that really changed him. I think it's more the fact that they play it oddly. Like I understand O'Brien willing to. It's sort of weird to be like, I'll go back in time and assume the mantle of the old me, even though I am me. But I think that I think it just ties into the problem of what we said at the top, where future O'Brien doesn't seem like future O'Brien as much as he's another dimension O'Brien who's unaware of everything that's going on, because he's literally at the very end, he's running as the station is blowing up, he's running around in like his nightgown. Sort of like looking out of
his PJs.
Yeah, out of hand and stuff. And I think that if he had worked with his future self a little bit more, I think it would have cleared up this messiness about him going back at the end, because you're like, oh, it is O'Brien, but they play them as very different characters. I think our O'Brien who goes back is ready to make the noble sacrifice, and the other O'Brien kind of strikes me as a little bit cowardly on some level. But he shouldn't be. He should be Miles O'Brien willing to go back and save the day by going back in time.
So I've sort of just realized that I guess earlier in the episode we have O'Brien talk about how creepy it felt to check his body for a pulse to see himself dead. And I guess in theory then future O'Brien, when he comes back at the end, has gone through that experience and will have to live with that. He has seen what we learn early in the episode seems to be a really drastic thing for Miles O'Brien to process. But again, that's not really in the script. That's us realizing it, having spent 45 minutes talking about the show. It's like they haven't had Miles O'Brien have a closing 25 seconds of confronting his own mortality. It's just sort of went like, oh well, on to next week's adventure.
Right, and that's why I like Whispers better, because Whispers makes me think about things at the very end. Because the thing about Whispers is it's really a sort of like mindfuck with you about what's
completely
gone on and like how they treated O'Brien and what O'Brien thought he was and stuff like that. And I don't think Visionary really ends up hitting on that level.
No, it doesn't. It's also I guess my not my concern, but I'm really hoping that we're now into serialized storytelling. But will these one-off character moments start to have an impact on the characters? I mean, I don't want you to give away too much, obviously, but this is a Miles O'Brien who now should be a different character, but I'm guessing he'll just revert back to type next time, right?
He will. I mean, I think that makes sense because he kind of is just Miles O'Brien. Even at even at the end of the episode, he's kind of cavalier about it. He's just like, oh, it's kind of like a sitcom-y ending. He's like, I'll see you guys later, and as he knows the future for a couple hours.
I will say though, I did enjoy the ending immensely.
He'll stay the same. But anyway, we talked about this one for a while. We're going to take a break. I'm going to play an audio clip, and me and Neil are going to come back. We'll give our final thoughts. We'll read some patron thoughts, and then we'll call it a day.
Miles, you've got your answer. The quantum singularity that's been orbiting the station. It's the Romulans. Are you listening? The Romulans use a confined singularity to power their warp core. That's what we've been detecting. That's what's causing the time shifts. You must go back and tell them to put up the shields and stand by for an attack. I can't get through another shift. It's the radiation poisoning. You go. Just activated. It's set for the return trip.
Me?
I don't belong there. I'm you. You're me. It just doesn't matter. Just go. Go!
All right, everybody. So if you support the show on patreon.com/the Pensky File, you get to leave your thoughts about upcoming episodes. We read them on the podcast and react to them. Christian Pouch says, Visionary, the book of DS9, chapter 3, verse 16, O'Brien must suffer. Is this the first sci-fi story that DS9 has done really well? Really, it's not pure sci-fi, but rather a detective mystery story framed by a sci-fi element, and it works really well. It's backed up by the Romulan story in the background, from which we get some great Kira yelling scenes, and the two converge quite nicely. All in all, a fantastic episode. Agreed. Zam Nuclear Wessel says, Visionary, Dabo, O'Brien permanently being the wrong O'Brien is a great idea. It may never come up again, but I can always read it into his ill-at-ease expression. So there's your answer for that question.
There we go. Yes, we know, guys. We know. We can watch the show and tell our significant others, actually, this isn't the real Miles O'Brien. It's future O'Brien.
Anthony Alvarado says, Visionary, it's O'Brien, so it's good. Actually, all I really wanted to say is that this episode reminds me of the Futurama episode where no fan has gone before, where they explain why O'Brien is shifting, like putting too much air in a balloon, end quotes. If you haven't seen that Futurama episode, it's worth a watch. I have not seen that Futurama episode.
Me either. No, it sounds great.
Stephen Cobb says, Visionary, O'Brien must suffer, which is the storyline that we're going to go and stick with going forward. We're a little bit early, so those are all the comments that people have had. But thank you very much, patrons, for leaving your thoughts. Neil, what are you going to give this one on our 1 to 5 scale?
Well, I should say, just for the clip, I was going to say that I actually really enjoyed the Dabo sign-off line from O'Brien. I'm sorry. It was cheesy. It was very 1970s sitcom. But God damn it, Meany can pull that off. God, he's just the best, isn't he? I'm going to give it a 5. I'm going to give it a 5.
Okay, interesting. So you really enjoyed it, sounds like.
Yeah, I think I'd probably, if I was to sit down and do a kind of spreadsheet of actually ranking the episodes properly, it's probably a 4.
Yeah.
But it is definitely that moment where I looked at it and thought, oh, I'm really going to enjoy this show now. I've been forcing myself a little bit to get through some episodes. There's a few stinkers still in there. But there's enough in here to make me go, yes, this really is the show that everyone builds it up to be, which is great because it would be really depressing if everyone had built it up so much and the things that they talked about, like Cisco being a badass, like O'Brien must suffer, like the growing character development, if that hadn't come to pass, but I can really see it now starting to come to pass, and it feels great as a nerd who has 4.5 seasons of this stuff to go.
I'll give it a 4. I think. I think that the time travel aspect kind of holds it back for me, although I love the way that they mix the storylines. I think that's a very effective mixing of the Romulan with the time travel aspect. I think it's good. I think I prefer Whispers on some level a little bit. They're very similar. I don't mean to compare them endlessly to each other, but I think this episode is missing a little bit of what I think is special about Whispers, and Whispers elevates that material a little bit. But I'll give it a 4. I think it's a very strong episode. It's a good O'Brien episode. It's a good random one to throw on kind of episode. But that's about it. Thank you very much, guys, for supporting the show. Thank you for leaving comments. Patreon.com/the Pensky File if you want to support the show there. You get to come on, do podcasts. If you're on a certain tier, you can leave your thoughts about upcoming episodes. We get all the podcasts that go up extra. And that's about it. Otherwise, social media, Facebook, Twitter, blah, blah, blah. Discord is the big one. You can go to Discord. We have a little server link. It'll be in the podcast blurb or the video description on YouTube. Real Ripe and Real Rotten will be coming back. Badass, the podcast, should be coming up at some point soon. We're almost done, or Clay's almost done with those. I think that's it. Neil, thank you very much for coming on again. Thank you for putting up with the technical difficulties, but we got through it, I think. We're done.
I think all the problems are on my end, so thank you for bearing with me. No Miles O'Brien am I. I cannot fix anything, so thank you for bearing with me. And, from all the patrons, as always, Wes, thanks for putting together a podcast that is leaps and bounds above every other Star Trek podcast. And trust me, I've listened to some of them, and if you join my Patreon scheme, I'll tell you which ones I really don't like for just $10 a month.
That'll be next in line. Well, thank you. That's very kind. We tried to do,
it's just great to have like dissonant voices. Honestly, to have people who don't just go, "Well, the show's good now, hallelujah," like I do, but people who go, "It's good. Here's what it could do better." And you and Claire are doing a great job of that, and all the other Patreon and Darren Mooney, the second best Irish guest on the podcast.
It's stiff competition. I mean, does I guess?
Oh my god, he was so good.
He is very good. He'll be back.
Oh my god, it's terrible. He was so good.
But what does there's a disproportionate number of Irish and British listeners. Is Star Trek just on TV constantly over there or something? Like I'm sort of surprised by the amount of overseas listeners there are.
It used to be. I don't really have, like, I guess the equivalent of basic cable in the States.
Sure.
I used to have that growing up, and I don't really anymore. We're sort of a Netflixy, streamy sort of household now. But certainly on Sky One, which is one of the bigger satellite TV channels, Sunday afternoon was Star Trek. It was TNG, it was DS9, it was Voyager, all in a big block. There was TNG on every evening. So I reckon for nerds of our age, it was pretty impactful in the UK. You get a decent amount of conventions too, and people coming across. And then I think as well what happened, and certainly how I discovered the pod, it's something we talked about on Discord, was they dropped the TNG and DS9, I think, arrived on Netflix about a year and a half ago. And your podcast was sort of like really finding its feet then. So it's sort of, there's a nice symmetry there, or a nice...
Still is.
There's a nice overlay. No. I mean, I just, I remember listening to the early podcast, which was you on your own talking about like justice, which must have been very difficult.
Yes.
And so, as you and Clay have become the kind of cornerstone of the show, God, I'm really sucking up now. And other people have joined the show as well. It's just been I think the timing has been really nice. And it's been great. I had one quick non sequitur as well.
Sure.
I've said it to you in Discord, but I want to recommend it on the record. Adam Curtis documentaries. I think a lot of people who like DS9 and thinking about big issues that DS9 brings up will like them. It's basically a guy, an amazing documentary maker, let loose in the BBC archives. He mixes music with amazing historical pictures and makes you think about things like Trump and Syria and the Middle East and oil and British politics and everything big in a really intelligent way. And I think you would love them.
Where do you watch it?
The listeners would. You can get, I'm not sure in the States, I'm sure BBC America probably has access to it. Anyone in the UK can watch it on iPlayer. And there's some stuff knocking around on YouTube that I probably shouldn't plug.
Cool. Well, yeah, people can check that out. The times they are changing, as the song would say. I don't think I have a non sequitur, but let me see here quickly. No, the baby's starting to cry in the background, so we should wrap this up.
Oh God, go to the baby. Unless future Wes can go to the baby.
That's probably the reason he's crying, is because future Wes is in there talking to him, and he's like, I don't care about anything you have to say. That's about it. Neil, thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks, Wes.
I bet the audio just crashed right now. Did it? He seemed to be gone, but I will wrap it up. There he's back.
Yeah, just wrap it up. Wrap it up quick. We're ahead of ourselves.
The internet's collapsing just like the New World Order. Guys, thank you very much for listening to the show. Neil, thanks for coming on, and we will be back next time, and I'll see you in a couple days. Thanks.